Alright, ladies and gentlemen, this is once again AK Rex. I'm here again with John. This is part 3. And in part 3, we're just going to carry on reviewing our first episode of the Walking with Dinosaurs program. And that is the episode The New Blood. Or I don't think there was the in it, but you know which one I'm talking about. Anyway, we are on our next animal, and John has made this collage and slide with the Peteinosaurus. I have a few only minor things to say about it, but before I do, actually I want to give you the microphone, John, because you probably have some things to say as well. So you go first, and then I will add whatever I have if there is any.
Okay, so I'll start off right off the bat. If you're coming from part two, I do not have as much to say on pterosaurs as I do with mammals or archosaurs or dinosaurs, but um, I will say that Peteinosaurus, in this, to the best of my knowledge, Peteinosaurus in the documentary is, I'd say it's pretty good. I don't think there's anything that makes it strikingly inaccurate, but then again, I could be missing something that our scene will correct me on right away. In terms of how the program talks about it, the design, there's a few light hairs on the design, so a little bit of fur on it. That's a conversation that maybe we could get in more detail about on a different program. I think you, Jason, and Jeffrey have talked about it though in the past about pterosaurs maybe having fuzz, or maybe they didn't have fuzz. Anyways, this animal in the documentary does have some kind of fuzz on its body, and its general depiction, it's only in for like a couple of scenes in the entire documentary. It's depicted in a way that I think is pretty accurate. It hangs around riverways, and it's hunting dragonflies, which I can completely believe. This is not an animal that I would suspect would be going around skimming the water for fish. This was the kind of animal that probably was catching insects on the fly, to the best of my knowledge. And um, so one of the things that Peteinosaurus does seem to have that is unique to the other pterosaurs in the program is it has this very short, deep skull. The upper jaw is sort of is quite a bit high, and as far as I can tell, that is still accurate. But pterosaur experts in the comments, feel free to point out anything that I miss with this. So Peteinosaurus overall, I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I don't think it's too bad, but there is one big criticism about it, and I'm sure Arsene, you'll probably bring it up as well, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later on in the video. But in terms of its geography and where it sits in the Triassic, so in terms of depiction and appearance, I think it's okay. But uh, I will now pass the microphone to Arsene. You tell me what you think.
I'm generally agreeing with everything, more or less. There is, of course, yes, there is an issue with this, and this is coming to both the geography, which would be in this case Italy. It's an Italian pterosaur, and also it first appeared at 218 million years ago, and last recorded at 200. Sorry, yeah, 218, and last recorded at 215, which is when we have our Silophysis show up. So they would just barely be overlapping, and it would also not overlap with uh, Trinoxodon, obviously, because that if we assume that it was a Trinoxodon, that didn't live at the same time and in the same place. So, and geographically speaking, also it would not fit within all the other animals that are in this show together. Um, Maybe just barely you could maybe stretch as far as saying that it might be with Plateosaurus, simply because they are both on the European subcontinent. But again, I would need to see a bit more evidence of that in order to, you know, rely on this idea that either of these, if they were found within the proximities of where Germany and Italy are respectively, then I would be quite happy to accept that they may have lived in the same environment. But as of now, I'm not too sure. And um, correct me if I'm wrong also, but um, the fossils that we know, at least, uh, the preserved whatever was preserved. Has there actually been any skulls preserved of any specimens? To my knowledge, there has been no skull preserved actually, so we cannot reliably verify if this particular um, pterosaur, which seems to have only this species anyway. There's not any other species listed, as far as I can tell. Um, so we are basically relying on closest relatives, you know, to reconstruct the skull. Same way we are relying on other relatives for Metriacanthosaurus, because Metriacanthosaurus, as an example, those of you who know of this dinosaur, it's basically the type taxon for a family, which is Metriacanthosauridae, but yet I think other members of that family are better known and studied than the Metriacanthosaurus itself. And also Metriacanthosaurus lacks skull material. So yeah, this is another type of example where we can see that this pterosaur, even though the family is Uterosauria, it's, it lacks skull. So I don't know if whatever the depiction of the skull in a program, if it's actually correct or not, because we just don't have the skull. So I don't even know what to say about
you know
it.
what? You know what? In that case, that just goes to show that's my fault then. So I just double checked the Wikipedia page just to quickly see if there was anything for a skull. If there's a skull in any of these specimens, it's clearly just smashed in there. It's not like you can really point out where the skull is. So I'm gonna eat my own words and say that no, I don't know if the skull is accurate or not. In terms of the classification for Peteinosaurus, at least the one I'm seeing on Wikipedia, which is based off of, I believe, Upchurch et al. 2015. It's not like it shares any common ancestors with any other pterosaurs. It's kind of just sticking out as its own species. And so I don't know if it would have, if the whatever skull it may have had, it looks like it would have had to have been um it looks like it would had to have been based off of a close relative, which I don't know then what close, maybe you Dimorphodon or Dimorphodon itself, but I don't know what else it could have based it off of. So um yeah, it's like there's fragmentary and disarticulated, that is the holotype. The paratype lacks any diagnostic features of Peteinosaurus and thus might be a different species. Okay, well then any particular inaccuracies on the body itself, probably we don't know if they are or they're not, because the specimens are not in especially great uh not in especially great condition.
I think so too, and but one thing I do want to say though, on a positive side of things at least, is that I think it's pretty safe to say that the portrayal of it being an insectivore in that case was quite neat. I mean, its wingspan estimated barely to be about 1 meter, which is not a lot really for a pterosaur.
Yeah.
It's on a small size end, basically on a smaller end, and it's quite reasonable to suggest that certain insects and maybe even like small amphibians and perhaps even reptiles too, whatever were around at that time anyway, if there were any, uh, they would have probably made up a diet for it. As long as it was something that was very easily picked off, like small enough to get in its mouth, then yeah, I would assume it would easily eat it. I want to say that I quite liked one scene in particular, where it was taking a bath. I Kind of, it reminded me of this video I've recently watched on Instagram where there was this Japanese family who adopted, maybe they rescued a crow, uh, and people who are watching, if you don't know, there's a lot of crows in Japan, and they're so well fed that they grow super big, like really big. I can tell you, I've been to Japan twice, and I'm planning to go again in summer. That's actually what I'm preparing for anyway. When I was talking about earlier on, and I can tell you, crows there are not only numerous and abundant overall, but they grow pretty big. And this crow that they were raising, one time they put a video up when it was just taking a bath. They just put like a small sort of bathtub for it, and it was just there, just doing its thing, like diving in, just like shaking things around, then drying itself, and then doing another couple rounds, like this. And I was looking at this pterosaur, immediately thinking of that behavior. I'm just like, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. And I was curious whether or not they have taken that kind of behavior and used that as their point of reference. So I'm really curious if that's what they were using for it.
Interesting. I will say that is actually kind of a neat scene. That now that I'm thinking back to it, it's very quick, very brief. You wouldn't think much of it, but actually, it's a pretty reason, especially during that part in the episode where the dry season is getting really bad. It's something that is pretty reasonable for any small animal to just be taking a bath in a uh, and I also liked how the narrator structures it, where he says like he risks taking a cooling bath and he checks to make sure that there's no danger around, which I kind of I like that because you'd think, oh, taking a quick bathe in a cool pond in the heat of the day wouldn't be too bad, but I mean this thing is on the ground. The cynodonts could get it. The coelophysis could get it. You know, it's it gives a it's I just like that little detail of just emphasizing that even taking a bath like that is a very risky move for animals like a pterosaur. So
Yeah, it would be very risky because both a cynodont of some type, or at least of the size leak that is shown in the show, and the Salophysis, they're both big enough to absolutely just choke the living hell out of it or break it, in half.
yeah, yeah,
That because that thing is just tiny, it's fragile. Pterosaurs are incredibly fragile. Even the big ones, they're super fragile. Like if there's one bite on it, that's it. It's done. It's gone basically.
yeah, yeah,
It was not designed for the power fighting. Amongst themselves, maybe they were okay with it, but it's a different league completely. We're talking about It's like uh, imagine putting me with Mike Tyson on a ring. Who do you think is gonna fold after one punch? You know what I mean? So it's not even a contest. It would just be a massacre, basically. So, and uh, it's the same thing here. That something as agile and quick as Coelophysis would absolutely just destroy this Peteinosaurus, literally in a few seconds. So I kind of like these small details, and I think I appreciate the fact that we rewatched the show because when I was watching it for the first time, I didn't appreciate these little details. My eyes were completely somewhere else. Don't remember where they were, but for some reason I never really paid that much attention to this. And this time around I noticed this, and it was one of those things that most people maybe don't even pay attention to, similarly to how I didn't, when I watched it for the first time. And now I'm just like, wow, I'm appreciating the small parts of this show that is no big deal, but for some reason it feels like a big deal. I don't know how else to explain it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think we've already gone over the fact that yes, it's geographically separated from the other animals, being from Italy, and of course we mentioned the time period. And is there anything else you wanted to bring up in regards to Peteinosaurus?
No, I don't know. I don't got no much. I don't have a whole lot for Peteinosaurus now, so I think we can move on to the next and final animal of the episode.
I think so. In fact, if it is indeed the final animal on our list, coincidentally, that would be the final animal that actually appears in the episode. So,
Indeed, yeah.
which makes it a very interesting coincidence, if you will. But here we go, and it's none other than this German, large by Triassic standards. I mean, large-ish, maybe a medium to large size, I would say. Herbivore, Plateosaurus, and I have to say that. Can I actually start with the Plateosaurus and have you finish off, or do you
Yeah.
want to go
Yeah, that's
first?
fine. You start. You start.
Okay, okay, yeah, you started on the previous one, so I guess maybe I'll start on this one. So, I, I'm really, I have to say, I'm really quite happy with the portrayal in the show, both the design, of the creature. Although, yeah, I mean, I can tell that it's kind of dated, but it doesn't feel like it's out of place to me. I don't know if I'm using correct words to say it, but it doesn't feel out of place, except for obviously the geography, because this animal would have been in Germany, and it would just probably be way too great distance. Even if we look at Pangea as a big supercontinent at that time, it would still be too great to cover. Just way too great for something like that to coexist with all the other animals that were featured. Peteinosaurus, in fact, would have been the closest animal that I would believe could have coexisted with Plateosaurus as far as the show was concerned, where they exclusively named their creatures. But everything else, like Silophysis, Postosuchus, and Placerius, and Thrinaxodon, just no way. They would not be coexistent here at all. I just think that's geographical error here for sure. Having said that, though, I really like it how it kind of appears, and first thing it does, it just puts Silophysis on its place. In its place, sorry, I meant you wrong grammar here, but you know what I'm saying, right? So it's really nice to see that instantly, the that they're not just making herbivores wimpy, they are also showing that they can assert dominance in a sense too, and I've never appreciated that part before, and I think some of my viewers will also appreciate that part, because I know for a fact that my regular viewers of the channel, amongst some of them, I mean, they definitely make a point repeatedly about how herbivores are frequently being just portrayed as either some type of wimps who get bullied by everything else, by carnivores specifically, and they never get shown that they can do they can do shit, basically, if I wanted to say it like quite frankly like that. And I think that's demonstrated very well here. And secondly, I like the color scheme. It's very simple, it's not too busy, it's it's plain where it needs to be, it has a bit of detail where it needs to be, it's just spot on. Minus, of course, I would not probably argue about the model itself. I don't really know, because obviously I'm seeing this equivalent that you have provided in a slideshow, and those who cannot see it, if they're only listening, it's a prehistoric kingdoms um, model, which, yes, you can tell is a. I would say it's definitely a superior version, as far as I can tell. Especially when you look at the head, you can definitely see. And there is also this thing I am trying to think of, and this is where you could probably go into more details when you take your turn, John. Whether or not they could walk on all fours, were they obligatory quadrupeds, were they obligatory bipeds, were they just interchanging whenever it suited their purpose, which is what I'm more leaning to, but again, I'm not entirely certain on their locomotion. So I think, aside from what I have mentioned here, I'm pretty happy with the Plateosaurus in terms of what I have covered. So I want you to finish up with Plateosaurus now.
Cool. So to answer your question about the quadruped versus biped debate, as far as I can tell, Plateosaurus probably, as far as I can tell, Plateosaurus was bipedal as an obligate biped. The way that a lot of prosauropod forelimbs are built, they are not designed to pronate the hands and allow for them to walk on their four limbs. Now, there might have been some sauropodomorphs, some very, very early sauropodomorphs, before you get to proper sauropods that may have been able to walk on all four legs. In fact, there has to be at least some out there. I don't know which ones they are, but I know there's a few out there in the world that do show that they can go on all fours and walk on all fours, even if they could go on their hind limbs. But Plateosaurus was not one of them. Plateosaurus was an obligate biped, again, because of the way that the arm bones are structured. This thing would not be able to walk on all four limbs. So, one other thing that I will say about my personal thoughts on the design is, and this could just be just me eyeballing it, but I feel like the neck is a little short, at least in some of these screenshots. Obviously, Plateosaurus doesn't have an insanely long neck like what we see in sauropods, but I feel like the design in Walking with Dinosaurs has a little bit of a shorter neck than I would expect for Plateosaurus. And the skull, obviously, actually, it's funny we were talking about Peteinosaurus and its skull. The Plateosaurus skull almost has superficially resembles the Peteinosaurus skull. Probably not intentionally, but it was just funny that I just noticed that right now. Whereas Plateosaurus, though, has a very particular skull design that uh, is, I think it's better translated in the prehistoric kingdom model versus the one in the documentary. Now, I will say that I agree. I think the fact they present this thing as, despite being an early, being a prosauropod, it is presented as a uh, pretty beefy animal that you need something really, really big to challenge this thing, and even then it's not exactly a pushover. Um, I really appreciate that, especially because I think the only other times that we've really seen prosauropods, uh, I think, well, we can use when dinosaurs roamed America as an example. Ankylosaurus did use its hands to swat away a Centaurus, but then it was completely uh, just wiped out by the Dilophosaurus. Whereas, especially with these Plateosauruses, the biggest carnivore that lived with Plateosaurus was like Liliensternus, and I don't think Liliensternus were going around and attacking fully grown, healthy adult Plateosauruses because these things were big. These things were quite big, and I would imagine that they could have used their forelimbs for defense, and you don't really want to mess with these things. So it doesn't have the size advantage of sauropods, but it's still one of the biggest herbivores of its time, and you don't want to mess with this thing. So I do agree with its depiction, and I also generally like the color scheme. I don't know, it's eye catching, but it's not so vibrant that it looks like it's uh unrealistic for a prosauropod.
Well, since you've mentioned Lilia Sternus, well, it's actually supposed to be Lilia Stern. I think more German pronunciation, because obviously
Ah, okay.
both. No, no, I mean Latin and English pronunciation would be Lilia Sternus, but it's like it makes my tongue wanna twist towards saying it in a German way because there's just so obviously like mix of German syllables in there. So I just thought I'd point
Yeah,
that
yeah,
out as
yeah.
well. Just same way like Plateosaurus is. How do you pronounce it? The species name that you have listed here. Just say it.
Uh, I pronounce it Plateosaurus.
And the species name?
Uh, Crossingensis, I
Yes, there we
believe.
go. The Latin and probably German pronunciation would be Trosingensis, Trosingensis, or
Okay,
something like that.
okay.
So obviously, if we go into like nitty gritty linguistic, I mean, you know what? We should get Metatron on our channel. He will help us. But
That'd be funny.
yeah, he's like a pro linguist, so he will definitely help us out how to say it properly when it comes to like nitty gritty correct way rather than just the commonly accepted way, if you will. But that's a story for another time. Hopefully, we will do it someday. By the way, I really want to do that. And but yes, I say Liliosternus at about 5 or so meters in length, maybe about a quarter or maybe a third, not a quarter, maybe 1/5 of, yeah, maybe like about 1/5 of a ton, so about 200 kgs. It would still make quite a decent potential, predator to try, to go up against something like a smaller Plateosaurus, as you said correctly. But yes, the big one would just be not really there for it because it just probably wasn't even built for hunting something as big as that. It was probably built to hunt something. Again, it looks like it was built to be still more agile even for its size. It's like it's bigger than a Coelophysis, but it's smaller than a Dilophosaurus, and even
Yeah.
Dilophosaurus was still built. I mean, people can say um, whatever, but Dilophosaurus was probably like an in-betweener between for its size. I mean, obviously, and by the standards of that time period, anyway, it was somewhere like of an in-betweener between being a bit like stockier, but still not exactly stocky, like not still a massive powerhouse in any way. For at least for by theropod carnivorous theropod standards, I have to specify as well. So,
Right.
and I think this was the same case. So yes, I don't believe that a large Plateosaurus in its prime would have had a lot of enemies around at the time anyway, even wherever it was actually located, which is Germany. So um, yeah, I really really happy with how they ended that episode with the arrival of this group of Plateosaurus and putting that Coelophysis back in its place. As I've said before, can't get tired of saying it for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I just missed seeing carnivores being put in their place so for so long that seeing it here suddenly makes me notice it even more than I did before when I first watched the episode back in the days. So I don't know. It's just I guess that's could be playing into it a little bit. So any other thoughts on Plateosaurus?
Nothing in terms of the model itself. I think we'll talk. I think the next slide we'll be talking a bit more about the anachronisms or the general animals and where they all fit on the Triassic timeline and such. But overall, I don't have too many issues with the model itself, outside of what I've already mentioned with the being probably more of an obligate biped and the length of the neck and the head. So, otherwise, I think we can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, sure. It's right here already. I've put it up there, and
Perfect.
yes, this demonstrates basically everything that we have um, covered and nicely color coded as well, so we can see how some of these animals would, um, you know, in some cases they would barely just about, be inside and within the range, but only as I have mentioned before, at that 215 margin, which is where I would say all the top five of them, right? Yes, the top five of them would be within that range if they were at the 215 range. However, as soon as you go into um, basically that Thranaxodon, assuming that it was a Thranaxodon, obviously, then it's completely out of there. And of course, yes, we mentioned geography, obviously, but this is just the timeline itself. This is where I think it's a good way to just show the viewers what the anachronism here is and how going to the show's depicted timeline basically takes quite a few of these animals out of the picture if we are to stick by it strictly. Do you want to make any comments on this chart as well?
So I think for me, and I think we'll cover this more when we talk about alternate settings and alternate animals. And I'll explain a bit more about what I mean by those two when we get to them. But if I were to be put in a position where I could recreate this episode and keep it within the Chin Lee formation, I honestly think that I'd only keep Posasuchus and plus. So Posasuchus and plus Sirius I would keep, and maybe Coelophysis. But it would have to be at the 215 million year mark. And just so for anyone's information, I'm basing these timelines off of what I read on Wikipedia. So when you look at post Suchus, you'll notice that it just says Norian stage. That's because on Wikipedia, assuming it's accurate, um, it doesn't give any kind of time period for to map out Postosuchus. So now it wouldn't surprise me if it lived around the same time as Posterius or Coelophysis, but so far the only overlap that we have for any of them is 215 million years ago. So, or you would have to do Postosuchus and Posterius, get rid of Coelophysis, do a different dinosaur, and put it earlier in the timeline. But so that's what uh so you would have to like take out Peteinosaurus, take out Plateosaurus, take out Thrinaxon, obviously, maybe replace it with the actual Chinle Cynodont. And then depending on how the timelines work, you could maybe keep Postosuchus, Coelophysis, and Placerius together.
I would say even like for the sake of keeping that more accurate timeline of Cynodont, just keep it a generic Cynodont. You don't even have to name it since it doesn't play any big massive role in this program. It just gives you an idea, to demonstrate that yes, they were there, even if we cannot necessarily name them because we don't know what they are. They haven't been properly described, but we have the evidence. We know they were there, and we know that they were somewhat playing some kind of role in that ecosystem. So
Yeah.
that would have actually been sufficient to me. I would not have held it against them if they went with that.
Yeah, just kind of like what when Dinosaurs Roamed America did, where they had that Traversadont, it they couple of lines, it got pissed off with the Coelophysis, bothering it, and we went on its way. We got enough information with that, and we didn't need to have an entire plot line of hyper speculative parenting and monogamy and all that stuff, and just have it there to just show that, yep, these were early ancestors of mammals. This is what they might have been doing in the ecosystem, and keep it within the realm of believability. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, sounds good to me as well. So, is there anything else you wanted to cover on this part or the next slide?
I think anything else that I could cover would be we could talk about in the alternate settings and alternate species.
Okay, yeah. How about we move to that slide then, because I think that would
Okay.
be appropriate. So, alternate settings. So, let's do the alternate settings first, right?
Yeah. So one of my thought processes with how I was going to do the slides for our videos on Walking with Dinosaurs um, was that because Walking with Dinosaurs doesn't have fossil segments like when dinosaurs roamed America, and it's very, very, very story based. I wanted to give off some different settings and maybe some different species that in retrospect would they be better settings for the episode, or would there be species that would be better fits for the episode. So the two that I chose for something that were similar to the Chinle formation in New Blood were the I believe it's Issue formation in Argentina, and then there's also the Santa Maria formation in Brazil. And both of these settings have a pretty substantial. Honestly, the Issue formation is probably the single best late Triassic formation um, that I'm familiar with just the amount of animals that you could have in the episode. Obviously, you couldn't add them all because of budget and such, but you have a lot to show. And the Santa Maria is actually pretty decent with its cast of animals. Um, the reason why I chose these two settings is because in the event that we were to go back and we were to remake New Blood, let's just say that instead of being confined to the Chinle, we could choose a different formation. I honestly think that these two formations have more to work with so that we wouldn't have to worry about anachronisms. So, for instance, you can still keep some of the similar ideas and themes of New Blood, while if you were to put it in the issue Elasto formation, you have Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus to work with. And that would be an interesting thing to see how Eoraptor deals with its environment versus Herrerasaurus. How do they both interact with animals like Issue which is the big Dicynodonts from the region. Um, you could have Saurosuchus, like we talked about in the post-Suchus section, be the big apex carnivore that the dinosaurs have to contend with. you have Exuridodon, you have a bunch of Cynodons you can choose from. You have amphibians, these big carnivorous amphibians that you could add to the episode as well. Rhynchosaurs, Etosaurs. There's just a lot that you can work with the Triassic. Honestly, the Triassic is steadily becoming my favorite time period in the Mesozoic because of just how bizarre things were. And I think that you could absolutely make an episode of any documentary series that really does a really good job of showing that breadth of animal life from the Triassic. And to Walking with Dinosaurs' credit, New Blood does a good job of it, but I think that again, if we were to remake it so that we wouldn't be finding these pitfalls, I think you could absolutely do it with Issue Elasto. You also have more dinosaurs to work with, and I will get to that point when we do the alternate species. But you have a few more dinosaurs to work with Issue Elasto, and then Santa Maria. Um, that's where you can get some, at least in the upper levels, you have Etosaurs and the Rausuchids. I think in the lower sections you have Dicynodons. They don't transfer over into the upper layers. But I just think that if we were to go back and we were to choose a different setting, because again, this is not like we're confining ourselves to North America. This is we have the freedom to choose um, what formations we want for this series. That's very narrative based. I think that there's a couple of other options that they could have gone with that still stick to the spirit of what New Blood was trying to present to us.
I completely agree with this, and I love these choices personally, especially the Argentinian one, the Ishigulasto one. That's just like, obviously I might be butchering the name, so forgive me, any Argentinians who may be watching, or any other uh, Latin American Spanish speakers, if you will, basically, who are watching this. So I'm totally butchering this probably, but I like that the first roster, especially the Argentinian one. I'm just surprised why hasn't anyone else properly done it before. Dinosaur Revolution tried to do it, but they did a pretty. I mean, I have to rewatch it again, but given how comedic and just trippy the entire show is, I cannot take it seriously. I'm not gonna get into it here, but we might one day put it on our review list. But I personally, as far as I'm concerned, it's on a very, very low priority list because of all the other stuff that we have yet to do. That is just actually trying to take things a bit more seriously, which is what we're also trying to do in a way too. So that's why it would make it a bit more appropriate for a review. I don't even know if Dinosaur Revolution itself, aside from creature designs only, is appropriate to really even do a proper serious review on. So let me know in the comments what you think about that particular point as well. But I would have loved to see this Argentinian environment brought because of just how much stuff is in there. And yes, I have to unfortunately agree that they probably would have to compromise in the sense of how much they can put in there. But at least have it, appear briefly for one small scene, even if nothing else will come of it. Like, just have that one scene where they have, uh, this, you know, uh, a big amphibian trying to snatch a small animal and maybe it misses its mark or whatever, or maybe we have one of the star animals that is trying to take a drink and it gets attacked by that amphibian, as like presented as if it's a sign of danger that they have to look out for, and that would be one of those things. I would have loved to see something like that, even if nothing else ever gets shown, and we could just get a name maybe drop there and that's it. Just be like, yeah, well, that dinosaur, whatever, was trying to take a drink there, got lucky. That amphibian did not get lucky, so it has to wait for the next potential target to come over, whatever. Moving on, right?
Right.
So I would have loved something like that. And then, of course, similarly, like a Herrerasaurus maybe hunting one of those Rhynchosaurs, and then that Saurosuchus just shows up and be like, no, I'll have that, thanks, and just takes it and walks off. And if anyone tries to take it back, maybe you could have like a Herrerasaurus try to actually bite a chunk of it while from its mouth, similarly to how some birds do it, or crocs do it as well, like smaller ones, like the big one is like trying to carry it and drag it off, and the small ones just try to take bits and pieces of it while it's being dragged away. I would have liked to see something like that as well, and then have these smaller Eoraptors trying to pick up the leftovers quickly and just running away as well. I want to see a bit more like action type of scenes of this sort, where you know that they are going to attract a big chunk of different predators together, and they try to kind of backstab each other as quickly as possible so that they can get the best parts of it. And I want to see more of this basically. And I think this would have been a perfect segment for that if you had a setting like this one. It would have really captured it, and you would get away with having multiple species on a screen at the same time, and you get a lot more depth when it comes to content. I don't know. I think that's what I would pick. Santa Maria is still decent candidate, but it just doesn't feel like it would necessarily stand up to the same level as the other one for me.
No, no. I mean, I put it in there as another alternative option, but issue will ask though is that's peak Triassic right there. That is peak Triassic.
Yeah, I would say if I were to characterize Triassic in its peak prime like way as far as content material goes, I would go to that as well. I probably wouldn't even be able to pick out anything equivalent in Europe either that would be quite as rich in content, or same like in Asia or Africa, that would be on the same level at least as this one. I think this one probably, at the very least, I would say this takes the first spot. Which one would take the second spot? You could maybe have an argument about that.
Yeah,
the top.
yeah.
If you were to do like the top three for it. In fact, in the comments down below, everybody who watching, if you feel like it, of course, please let us know which environments would you think would have been really good candidates as well to explore as far as Triassic goes. That would be very rich in content, but also remember they have to, I think, feature dinosaurs because the show is walking with dinosaurs, so we have to have dinosaur species in them to illustrate that this is how they kind of started, right? While everything else was there, that was on a decline, and dinosaurs were kind of on a rise, and that's the whole point of it. So I think, with that in mind, I would like to see your ideas as well. So, is there anything else you wanted to cover on this part, or shall we move to the next slide on the alternate species to use for this?
Let's talk about alternate species.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring up this. Where is it here? Right here. Now, I am very much. First thing I see, of course, is I assume that these are all the alternate species that you could use perhaps for the Chinle formation, and
Correct.
and I would assume also, likewise, that they would be contemporary, so they don't fall out of range when it comes to the time periods, right? So they would still be within the range of the time period of all the other animals that have been used in this program, but also feature in Chinle formation, right?
Yep. When I do my best to make sure they are aligned so that they match up with as many animals as possible, so that we don't have to sacrifice too many of the original cast, but that we can have them be with some more appropriate animals. So I think a big missed opportunity that Walking with Dinosaurs had, that ironically, when Dinosaurs Roamed America um, took advantage of, was the fact that they did not have Etosaurs, and they did not have Phytosaurs. So we did not see anything like Smilosukis or Redondosaurus, and we didn't see anything like Desmatosukis, Scutarx, Paratypothorax or Typothorax. We did not get those. And I think if we were to remake Walking with Dinosaurs and still stick with the Chin Lee formation, I would absolutely add Phytosaurs and Etosaurs to the episode.
Yeah, especially Adosaurus, like these two here. It's like, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they feel to me like they are the reptile pigs basically. I don't know why I think of that, but for some reason their noses make me feel like they are quite likely to want to stick them in the ground and like kind of ruffle up the soil a little bit. I don't know if that was actually what they did, but I would not be
That's
surprised. if they did
They
that.
there's been some speculation. I think the other paleontologists think that was what they were doing as well. So it's very reasonable that they were using their snouts kind of like what pigs and such do. So
And also, not to mention, cool looking creatures with lots of armor on. You can never go wrong
yep.
with armor. That's just a proven fact. Armor just rules. And likewise, Smilosuchus being probably, in fact, Smilosuchus gregori is the largest of the entire group of phytosaurs, to my knowledge, anyway. I think
Okay.
because they have two species or more species than that. I'm not sure, but I know I've heard. I think that the Grigori one is the larger of the species, and it is also the largest representatives of Phytosauria, which would be basically just amazing. You would be making another icon if you were to include it, basically in that sense.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And I would have loved to see how these different creatures behaved together when you have this Smilosuchus, Postosuchus. And speaking of, now this is the important part. Which dinosaur do we include to make it consistent with the show's theme?
Right. Right. So this is tricky. So I have Camposaurus here with a question mark because um so dinosaur material in the Chinle is a bit of a hot mess. Some of them that we know of, like Gojirosaurus, are from New Mexico, but if we're going to keep it in Arizona, I'd want to try and find an Arizonan species. So, and the thing is, Coelophysis, even though it could technically work if all the stars aligned and all the timelines aligned, um, part of the reason why it was chosen was because it was the best known at the time, the best known Triassic dinosaur. And honestly, it's probably still up there as like the best or one of the best known and well studied Triassic dinosaurs. So that's part of the reason why Coelophysis was chosen, according to what I read in the Walking with Dinosaurs book. Now, um, the problem is that Coelophysis being so late in its time range, um, you have to sacrifice a ton of other animals to make Coelophysis work. So, I tried looking into what are some other dinosaurs that could work for this, and the only two, I only have one up here, but there's two that I would maybe be willing to try. One is Camposaurus, and the other is Chindesaurus. And it's not like they're known from extremely good material, but they're probably the two that I would go with to um to be the star dinosaur of the episode if we were to replace Coelophysis with another dinosaur.
And the second one after Camposaurus, what's the name of the second one again?
Chindesaurus. So it's kind of like
Chindesaurus.
Chinlesaurus. Yeah, so but instead of the L, it's the D, so
Yeah.
Chindesaurus.
So Chinlesaurus with a D, basically, right? Gotcha.
Yeah, basically.
And what do we know about it? And Camposaurus, as far as the dimensions, size, and the body build, whatever is possible to figure out here. What do we know about them both?
Uh, ooh, um, I'm not gonna pretend like there's a ton. Yeah, so I'm looking at Camposaurus right now. The holotype, the Camposaurus is known from a partial lower leg bones holotype, which includes distal tibiae, distal fibulae, and I am not going to attempt to say that, and other fragmentary material. So that's not very well known. And what about Chindosaurus? Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's not great either. We have like some neck and tail vertebra. We have some thoracic vertebra or and some hip bones. But again, like when I make a massive asterisk at both Camposaurus and Chindosaurus, noting that neither of them are remotely as well. Uh, they do not have the same material as Coelophysis. So we don't have a good idea as to how big they were. We don't know how what they would have looked like throughout the entire body. So um, just be aware that this is not an I do not like choosing Camposaurus or Chindosaurus, but those were the two that I went with because of um to try and make it work somehow.
I would be happy with either of these choices as well, and the reason why is I think this could demonstrate how basically you have these other animals that are currently quote unquote in charge, and dinosaurs are still more or less in the shadow here. And that's probably the entire message of this segment, of this episode. What they're trying to demonstrate, they're showing that dinosaurs are beginning to rise, but they are not yet there. So,
Right.
and that would make sense. Why would these other crazy, awesome Triassic animals would be outshining them at that stage and would be taking up quite a lot of this attention, because they would appear to be the more awesome ones on the block at this point, while in the later parts we will have something else entirely, and then we see a different picture, right? So I think that's what, for the purpose at least, and given, if that were the assignment, I would probably say that's perfectly, and if we have to stay within the Chinley formation as well,
Right.
it's still not a bad thing, given all the other things that you can get in there. But
Mm-hmm.
of course, I would say it doesn't stand on the same level as the Argentinian one. Just,
No,
just,
no.
just doesn't. Even if we have Smilasukas in there, I still don't think, and this Matasukas as well, I still don't think it would stand quite on the same level anyway. It would need. I mean, I would be happy maybe to stretch it down to say it's maybe number 2 or potentially number 3, depending on what other alternatives are. I would not put it on number
Mm-hmm.
1 if I could choose between that or that Argentinian one. Argentinian one, hands down, is the number 1 choice. If I were to pick anything, right? So
Right.
I would
Right.
probably stick
I
with that.
think Yeah, I think Ishiwalasto is number 1 on my list. Chinley is number 2, and Santa Maria is number 3.
I'm personally happy with that choice. I would probably look a bit more to see if there's any other interesting alternative anywhere else, like in Africa
Sure.
or in Europe. But something tells me that even if there is enough variation with the animals, there's a possibility that because of the lack of the fossils, the specimens, basically, you would find that maybe they are a bit scattered around timelines a little bit here and there without, being entirely consistent. So, and to make it even out, to understand how they fit better, you would need at least multiple specimens to see what range specifically that would cover, maybe, because sometimes you have animals of same species that span across different layers here and there, and that's how you
Uh-huh.
determine, you know. As an example, we've had Hell Creek and all of these stratigraphically equivalent contemporary formations that where we thought that Tyrannosaurus, where when we, described only T-Rex, we would say, yeah, it's basically the last, what is it, 68, 67, 60. So yeah, it's like the last 3 million years of existence of dinosaurs altogether. That's where Tyrannosaurus Rex basically fits. And then all of a sudden we find that Macriensis, if we are to assume that it's a genus of Tyrannosaurus, if we are to assume that it's correctly identified, that by that logic we can stretch the genus's range further earlier on to earlier time periods. So, and that's quite a big steep jump, I think, all the way down to like what 71 million years, I think it was, or something like that, which was
Around there.
around there somewhere, yeah. Which I would say is a bit unheard of when it comes to Tyrannosaurus as a genus. Nobody has ever even stretched it that far. Not even as far as 69, because 68 is like the top down, if you will. And anywhere beyond that, we just don't see it anywhere on the record. And then all of a sudden, we have this one that goes all the way back to 71. And I think this is probably one of the things that we could potentially uncover if we were to find more specimens of some of these animals in Europe and in Africa, wherever there's potentially more abundance of them that we could think of. I'm not going to say anything about Asia on Triassic because it's just not that familiar. Asia to me mostly associates with either Cretaceous or in some cases like middle to late Jurassic, I guess, probably more on the later side.
Yeah.
So these are the only time periods I can really think of as far as Asia is concerned. But
I can.
yeah,
I was gonna say real fast. For the Triassic in Asia, I know there's some formations in Russia that are actually pretty good. But the thing is that those are early Triassic. So if our range has to include like Triassic dinosaurs, that would not work. And the thing is, that's kind of the problem with Africa as well, because there's the Manda beds in Africa. I forget which country, but they have some Triassic, early and middle Triassic formations in Africa, but they only have like dinosauromorphs. So if our criteria was that you have to have a true dinosaur, then I don't know if Africa would work. So or Asia.
yeah, and that's the problem because it means that we are restricted uh, by the idea that we need to have a dinosaur in it, and dinosaurs simply just don't pop up earlier than what we know as far as that can be helped.
Right.
Unfortunately or not, we cannot really judge it. It's just how it is, I guess.
Yeah.
I was also thinking maybe of something like I don't know, even Trossingen or Trossingen, depending on how you pronounce it, could be something we could look at. But then again, it's it's hard to say perhaps what we can like. I mean, yeah, Liliosternus and Plateosaurus, and then of course we can have a few other animals here and there. But I just feel like the variety there just isn't going to be quite as great. It's very limited
Mhm.
by comparison, so it's not nearly as rich. And if we are to look at formations that have this, and again, we're talking about if we were to remake it now at this
Mhm.
point, because a lot of the animals, I think that I am, well, at least one of them that I'm going to list, which has only been described and discovered very recently from very, very small fragments anyway, as far as I'm aware of. The Ichthyotitan, the largest ichthyosaur from Britain, if I'm correct.
Yep. Yep.
And imagine if we had more evidence of other animals there from that period that would at least include a dinosaur and kind of make Triassic segment that doesn't typically always show. I mean, we could have a parallel, we could have a fragment in England and of a similar contemporary period, like say from Argentina, right? And we could have a dinosaur that is there, but also sometimes maybe occasionally just see what the big ichthyotitan, because it's just freaking huge and it would have been pretty amazing to look at. And then we go back to Argentina with other cast, if you will, that do their thing over there. Completely different setting, right? By comparison from the coastal setting of that environment or whatever. I kind of really like the idea of potentially doing a segment or an episode where there's multiple parallel locations, maybe like two at most, I would say would be reasonable for a relatively short
Yeah.
length episode.
Yeah.
Like if you had maybe how long is this single episode? Is it about 20 or 25 minutes or more than that? I think it was, no?
I think about half an hour.
Half an hour ish,
Uh,
okay. So let's say it's 35 minutes, right? So then, yeah, two settings in
right.
parallel would be sufficient, more than enough. But if we were able to get away with, say, having, I don't know, maybe like 1 hour episodes, which would be a massive, very generous, I guess, but would be great, right? If we had that, then
Mhm.
we could go as far as say, okay, three different locations and just focus on different scenes, that describe different lifestyles and things that were happening there as well, maybe, and focus more on specific megafauna that lived there. So I don't know. These are just my obviously personal thoughts and ideas.
No, no, I agree. I mean, if we had, let's just say that we were given like the freedom to give like an hour-long episode of something, and we would have all the resources and money to make it as cool and fascinating and engaging for an hour. I think what we could do, this is my thought,
I
is have maybe a first segment talk about um, dinosauromorphs. So before we get to dinosaurs, we look at what their ancestors were like. Have the second segment take place like in the issue Elasto formation. So proper dinosaurs, but they're still kind of in this. They're still kind of underdogs compared to all these other reptiles. And then the third section could be Trossagain, and that's where you see Lilian Sternus and Plateosaurus and these bigger dinosaurs actually sort of coming to take on these niches that were originally held by things like Postosuchus, Placerius, Desmatosuchus, and all these other crazy um, animals during the Triassic. So it'd be a good progression from uh, before dinosaurs, their direct ancestors, early dinosaurs, and then the dinosaurs that would help give rise to the creatures of the Jurassic. And it would be a neat that you could see like the through line between each of these segments, and then it would be able. It would be a good way to bookend it before we get to the Jurassic period.
Yeah, I mean, I would say just to make it a bit more humorous, perhaps, regardless. And again, this is not politics or anything, but let's just imagine like what it would be like if Elon Musk gave you all the money, as much money as you want, to make the amazing documentary, and he didn't care if it's profitable or not. He just said, I just love the idea, guys. Here, tell me how much, and I'll write a check, and off you go. Have fun, basically. If that happened, this is how we're basically approaching it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
So
one could only hope, I guess. And I mean, I'm sure many people wouldn't mind that happening, regardless of what their views on the guy are, which we're not getting into. But I'm just saying that if he were to approach it from that point of view and said, okay, now raise hands who wants to do it, the entire room would fill up of people, just be like, me, please, me. And there's like, I don't know, 200 people with 200 documentary ideas immediately.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
All of a sudden you have this oversaturation of markets, with this type of content, and who knows? Maybe not a bad idea, to make something like this nice because, it would be nice to see different things that are done differently in some cases where there's different portrayals. And granted, I have a lot of criticism from what I have seen, at least from the prehistoric planet, but I'm glad that they produced it because they provided their own, it reflects the view of the creators, actually. That's what it does.
Yeah.
And that kind of shows their handwriting, if you will, quote unquote, is very obvious as well. Like, who made it just by looking at the program. You can tell who basically was behind making it. And and
Right,
that's
right.
fine. And my point is that's fine. So let's make more, and see how it would look if you had the same resources, but other people making it, behind making it, and just have fun with it.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? The more the merrier. I'm actually of that opinion. I'm not gonna say, oh no, this is rubbish. No, maybe I might see this probably as rubbish, quote unquote, by my personal metrics for whatever reason. But let it be there. Let's make more. Let's do more of this. You know what I mean? Let's have fun with it. That's my view on this, I guess. That's just my current day attitude towards it. Let's just say that much.
Right, right.
So, anything else you want to add on this? And I think otherwise, if not, then we can conclude this final
I think
part.
I think at least for New Blood, I think that I'm good. I guess my final concluding thoughts are that New Blood is it's a solid start. It's a really solid start. There's things that obviously have aged not so well, and some things that are really really speculative. But on the whole, I generally do like it. I think that um like I said, the setting is great. There's some really excellent shots of the environment that are really cool. Coelophysis, the behavior of Coelophysis in general, I thought it was great. It wasn't too out there. Honestly, there wasn't anything that came out as outside of the Cynodons. Really, there wasn't anything that struck me as holy crap. This is like way too speculative. I can't defend this. A lot of this is actually uh, pretty defensible overall and pretty reasonable. So overall, I really enjoyed New Blood. I think I think it might edge out When Dinosaurs Roamed America just a little bit, in terms of the Triassic segment, but uh,
Yeah,
you know,
I'm
I
kind
just
of also on this whole thing that I think the Triassic segment in Walking with Dinosaurs is a bit stronger. For me personally, it felt stronger
yeah,
than the
yeah,
one than the former one. Not far off though; they're still very close, but I still think it's a bit stronger, quite a
right,
bit stronger.
right,
Like I can notice it in terms of how I perceive it, but I still think it's not like not twice as much, for example, but just like a good decent fraction of it, but still there. And
yeah,
my main prediction is that our primary like criticisms and where we get to have more fun with it, I think, will come at later episodes. I
yes,
and the
yes,
next episode especially is gonna be interesting because there is things about the design levels that we will have to go back to after a while when we get to do the Ballad of Big Al, which is technically the same, quote unquote, the same time period, which we will get into as well because there is a bit of a mess in certain areas there as well. So, and I can't wait to get to that. But next one will be the, what is it, Time of Titans, right? I think
yep.
it's
Time of
called
the Titans.
Time of the Titans, yes. And it's a sudden jump ahead actually in time by comparison to this one because they don't even have a segment on early Jurassic like the, which is actually a plus on the When Dinosaurs Roamed America because they picked a segment there. But yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to expect that maybe different projects will focus on different aspects, which is cool. And this is one of the reasons why I want to go back to that point again, reiterated that, the more the merrier. Let's just make more of these things and just have fun with them. And even if we have to shit all over them, that's fine. Let's shit on it together and let's enjoy it together. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
this is the whole point. It's not about whether I like it or not as much as I just want to all of us together have beer and popcorn and enjoy shitting on it if that's what it is, and that's perfectly fine in my opinion. And well, I guess we have something to look forward to. There's gonna be plenty of criticism in the episodes to come. I can already like I see you, the Cruel Sea. I see you the what is it the mystery what's it called the ice forest one, the
Spirits of
fourth.
the Ice Forest.
Yes, that one, Spirits of the Ice Forest. Even the final one, the Death of Dynasty. Oh, that one, I have a lot of things I wanted to rant about on that as well. There's just so many different ones. I am currently at a position that from the main lineup, from these main program episodes,
Mhm.
New Blood is actually the strongest segment, which is why I think we have the least amount of criticism for it. But that's in my opinion. It might turn out different once we get into it a bit more. So we will find out. But I think it's so far looking to me from my perspective and my prediction, it's gonna be the strongest of the segments of the whole program. I think.
It's up there for me. It's up there for me, but I will have to check out for sure Time of the Titans and Cruel Sea because I remember as a kid, Cruel Sea was. I think I was very partial to Cruel Sea a lot, but um,
Oh,
yeah, looking
I
forward
loved
to
it.
rewatching them. And
I absolutely loved it. I think Cruel Sea, as far as the narrative part of it was, I think it was my favorite actually, of this main lineup anyway. I think it was absolutely my favorite. I loved it to bits in that sense at least. I loved this, contrast between what they were showing in the water and then what was happening on the coastlines. Different things, with the Streptospondylus, the Rhamphorhynchus. I was loving it absolutely like so much, and I think it's probably safe to say that was my favorite episode of the main series. So yeah, we have what was it? Is it the Cruel Sea? Oh yeah, then there's another one, the one about the uh,
Giant of the
Giants
Skies.
of the Skies. Yes, that's right. And then after that, it's gonna be the Spirits of the Ice Forest, and then the Death of Dynasty. Okay,
Yep,
gotcha.
yep,
So yeah,
yep,
we have what six? That's six episodes actually, right? So
yep. 6 episodes.
right, not bad, not bad. We'll get there. Anyway, is there anything else you wanted to add on the New Blood, or shall we wrap it up with a nice bow on top?
I think let's find ourselves a good bow and tie that knot. So
Okay, cool. Um, I prefer the floral pattern in that case. Purple with what? I'm just joking. Anyway, so uh, thank you very much for watching this 3-part this time. It's the first, in fact, our review where we do the multiple series, not just a single documentary piece, but a multiple series where we have 3-part videos. So that's small milestone. And yeah, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next episode in the time of the Titans. All right. And
yep,
John,
yep.
thank you for coming and making wonderful slides.
Thank you for having me.
All right, guys, take care and bye bye.
Ciao.